Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Maxwell's House is brought to you by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com. This is Maxwell's House with Ray Maxwell, episode 54 for January 2nd, 2010. Soak and sip. Maxwell's House is brought to you by the new voice-activated sync, featuring hands-free calling, music and podcast search, and turn-by-turn navigation. Available exclusively on Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury vehicles. For more details, visit syncmyride.com. It's time for Maxwell's House, the show that covers science, photography, hang gliding. Anything there is in the world that Ray Maxwell, who knows pretty much everything there is to know about everything, is interested in. That's what we talk about. Here he is from his home in near Vancouver, Vancouver, Canada, Vancouver, British Columbia, Mr. Ray Maxwell. Hey, Ray.
Hey, Leo. How are you doing?
I'm great. Welcome once again to Maxwell's House.
Indeed.
What do we got today? It looks like a pretty big agenda.
It is quite a potpourri of topics today, but the first one on the top of my list is I have to do a little errata from the last show. You, last time, were talking about the wonderful Robert Altman film, McCabe and Mrs Miller.
Yes.
And the fact that it was filmed near Vancouver. And that was back in 1970-71.
I had just watched the movie on DVD, and I was watching the Robert Altman commentary, the director's commentary. Really enjoyed it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I had mentioned that it was shot in Indian Arm because someone told me that way back at the time it was being shot. And I have since researched it and found out that I made several colossal errors and one ironic comment, which I want to correct.
All right.
And I remember.
Sorry, I got the Obama time capsule going. You were going to talk about that in a minute. Please ignore it. Go ahead.
Right, and my remember, I'm anamorphic too. I'm looking. Oh no, I'm okay on the. Okay, I look a little.
I'm confused if you're anamorphic or not. I'll unshrink you. Let's see if that looks good. I always forget and I shrink him. It's actually neither. It's in between. So sometimes you're wide, sometimes not.
Right. But back to McCabe and Mrs Miller, it was not shot at Indian Arm, and I made the comment that there was an old lodge up at the Indian Arm that was only reachable by float plane or boat, and that is true. And we used to take our float plane and go up there for supper.
That's cool.
And I said it was in and out of business. I made one colossal mistake. A number of years ago, it was taken over by the Royal Vancouver Yacht Club.
Well, I'll be darned.
And it is now a beautiful, restored outstation for members only of the Royal Vancouver Yacht Club.
Oh, so it's on the water then?
Yeah, they can sail in up the Indian Arm and dock their yachts right at the beautiful dock in front of the old hotel there and go in and have supper or whatnot. So, boy, did I get that wrong. I couldn't, because it went in and out of business a number of times in the 40 years that we've lived here. But it has been restored. It is in beautiful condition. And again, it is only reachable by boat or plane way up the end of Indian Arm. However, McCabe and Mrs Miller was not shot there. It was shot in what is today the Cypress Bowl Provincial Park.
Oh.
And here's the real irony. And it isn't that close to the West Van beautiful homes. It is in the vicinity of West Vancouver, which is some of the most wealthy people live in that area. But it is a ski area. It is a beautiful ski area. And the actual site of shooting the film was done in what is now a paved parking lot next to a beautiful day lodge at this beautiful ski area in Cypress Bowl. And I mentioned, whatever you do, don't look at that movie and think that's Vancouver and, connected with the Olympics in 2010. That ski area is the site of the freestyle skiing and snowboards for the 2010
there you go.
Olympics.
There you go.
If you're lucky enough to get a ticket to go to the freestyle or snowboard skiing, you will be crossing the parking lot where McCabe and Mrs Miller was shot.
I'll be darned.
What an irony, huh?
Yeah. Of course, that was 71, so
right.
A lot has changed.
A lot of water's gone under the bridge since then. And it's a totally, totally different site now.
Mm-hmm. Wow, isn't that funny?
Yeah,
none of the movie remains.
Nothing. There isn't a thing up there that looks anything like the movie.
Yeah.
I have gone skiing up there for a number of years, and there's nothing up there that gives you a hint that that movie was shot there. It was, it was the end of a logging road. Now there's a beautiful paved road, goes all the way up there. At the time they shot that movie, it was a logging road, and it was just like you see in the movie, muddy, snowy, gritty, etc. But it is ironic that it's one of the venues for the 2010 Olympics.
Well, come on. It's changed a lot since then.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, my. And then the next thing on my agenda is, I don't know whether you've seen it yet or not, but Rick Smolin and Jennifer Irwit, Rick, of course, is the guy who produced the Day in the Life series. Mm-hmm. And he also did the famous Day in the Life of the Internet, I think. And, I went through that website. I think it still exists. And I found two older persons' names emblazoned in it. One of them was Leo Laporte, and the other was Ray Maxwell.
What? Really?
Yeah, in the early days of the Internet. I don't know if you even remember it, but they invited everybody to participate and sign in, essentially, that you were on the Internet. And that was when the Internet, was just starting. And I found your name in it.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
So is it still online?
The last time I looked, I haven't looked in a year or two, but... Well,
of course, I know Rick not really well, but well enough. We had him on Tech TV quite a bit, and his recent book was about America, and it was kind of interesting because you could change the cover. You could put your own picture on the cover when you ordered it.
Right.
And so he's really very much on the forefront of this stuff. He's kind of an amazing fella.
He is.
Yeah.
Yeah. His real breakthrough first production was From Alice to Ocean.
Yes, which was beautiful.
Right, which included a CD that was done in HyperCard.
That's when I first met him. I was doing a show for PBS, and I interviewed him and did a piece on the From Alice to Ocean because it was a multimedia. It was the early days of multimedia. And
I took that book in. It was the first one done from photo CD that Kodak put out. All the scanning and so forth was done to photo CD.
24 Hours in Cyberspace. That was the name of it.
Yes.
It was in 1996.
Right.
And if I was in it, it's probably because right around then I covered his From Alice to Ocean thing. He did that in 77. He did that a while ago. Yeah.
Well, somewhere there's a long list of names of everybody that checked in with him or whatever that day. And I
see where it is. In the early 90s, Smolin published his pictures From Alice to Ocean as the first interactive story and photo CD. So that's what I did a review of, was that 1990s release of From Alice to Ocean. I remember that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting.
I took that book in as an example of producing a book from photo CD to a local printer. And the guy practically threw me out of the place, saying that people in the industry know that it was a fake and it was all done with $50,000 drum scanners. He wouldn't believe that it was done with, the Kodak scanning equipment and so forth.
And the new, again, he's on the cutting edge because this America at Home book that he just published last year, I guess they're printing on demand because, as I said, the cover is you. It's customizable.
Right. And what he's just announced is he's doing the Obama time capsule, which is a picture story of Obama's run up to the presidency. And again, it's customizable. You can send in your own pictures of things you were doing if you participated in the campaign or anything like that. And those pictures will be published in your own book.
So you're reading the book, and all of a sudden you come to, like, here's our family watching the inaugural or something.
Right.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's
so
really
once
neat.
again, he's managed to make the book customizable.
And it's $40 on Amazon, so it's not like you're paying extra for the privilege of being in the book. Rick is a really smart guy and a good marketer.
So I got this cool new book. It's called The Obama Time Capsule, and it captures Obama's inspiring journey to the White House. What's really unique is that you can personalize the book
By the way,
in 8 ways.
I don't know
example,
if you're noticing, but that ad is all CGI. That's very interesting the way they...
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It's very interesting. Look at the book carefully.
So I got this cool new book.
Watch.
It's called The Obama Time Capsule,
There's
and it
no
captures
book.
Obama's inspiring journey to the White House. What's really unique is that you can personalize the book in 8 ways.
Look at that.
For example...
It's totally a made-up book. That's so cool. Really neat. That's theobamatimecapsule.com.
Right.
Have you looked at the book?
I haven't, but I saw it online, and I may get a copy because I enjoy Smollen's work.
Yeah.
Everything that I've seen he's put out, I've enjoyed.
What do you think on that? You're a photographer. I have to say that I think this is true in fine arts in general, is that it's hard to make a living as an artist. I've been told this by photographers, that if you're going to make a living as a photographer, you can't just take great pictures. You've got to, it's a multidisciplinary event. You've got to market it. You've got to find ways and angles and new ideas so that you can make a living doing this.
Right.
And clearly that's what Rick's done. He's partners up with big companies. HP is his partner on this one. Kodak was his partner on some of his other stuff. In order to get the photographers in the Day in the Life series out there, he'd have all sorts of sponsors and partnerships. And he's a great photographer, very talented photographer, but that wasn't enough, sad to say. He had to do more.
No. It's very, very difficult to make it as a fine art photographer. There are a few. Steve Johnson's one. He's the current day protege of Ansel Adams and does a lot of work for the National Park Service. And you can buy his 30 by 40 prints for, I can't remember, it was $1,500 or $2,500 a pop. They're beautiful, and he shoots with a scan back camera, so they're extremely high resolution on a 4x5 kind of camera.
Right.
So, but you're right; it's very, very difficult today to make it, and almost always they have a commercial photography side or something like that. They do
weddings or something. I look at Rick Krog, who's a really talented photographer, but he is another guy who's, he writes books, he does lectures, he has to do more. And I think that's not just photography. I think it's probably all fine arts. Sad to say.
Yes.
We really don't support fine arts in this country in the way that, we ought to. But I guess it's always been that way. If you didn't have the de Medicis as your patrons, you had to do something else.
Since we don't have as many royal families running around.
It's not as easy as it used to be. Hey, we were talking about photography earlier. We were talking about the decade in digital photography. And the first camera of the digital decade, 1999, was the Nikon Coolpix. And Jammer B brought his Nikon Coolpix in. Now, this is the 990. The 950, I think, was the first. But it still has that swivel. Now, he's got a brace on this thing, and he's added a flash attachment to it and so forth. But it has that very strange, funky swivel. And I was thinking, it's a 3.3 megapixel camera, so it's not even as good as my phone. And I was thinking, it probably was this way because they needed that kind of length of distance of throw. If they hadn't done this swivel, the camera body would have been, 3 inches thick. The lens needed that much throw, probably.
That's right. I had that very rig, including the camera, the flash attachment.
Of course you did.
I did.
It's not a bad rig.
No.
I mean, it's solid. You hold it. It feels like a real camera, but 3.3 megapixels.
I believe that was the first digital camera that I owned.
Right.
I had another one that I was a beta tester for Kodak on.
They had $20,000 bodies, of course.
Yes.
But this was the first consumer.
It was beyond my comfort zone for price.
And,
but
and look at the memory he had in this.
Yeah.
I have to show you the memory.
Yes, I saw that. That's hilarious.
16 megabytes.
Megabytes, right.
8x Lexar.
Money, what's a megabyte?
So now that's not big enough to hold one image from my Canon 5D Mark II.
Precisely.
But it probably held 50 or 60 images from the 3 megapixel camera, maybe more.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And they didn't shoot RAW in those days. They shot JPEGs. So.
JPEG, of course.
Yeah.
Right.
Isn't that funny?
Oh. Now, I've got, speaking of photography, I have a little hint from Bill Atkinson again. You know, he has his photo card app we talked about on an earlier program. And on Luminous Landscape, he added an addendum to his announcement of photo card. And he said, you know, one of the problems is that if you just put photos in your photo folder, you know, under iPhoto, and you import those into your iPhone or your iPod Touch, they're limited. I forget what it is, but they're very small in resolution. In other words, when you sync, it downsizes it to fit the resolution that's needed in the iPod. And he said, really, to make your postcards with PhotoCard look nicer, you need about 1200 by 800. And the normal syncing downsizes your image. So he said, I had to find a way around that and a way to import higher resolution images to your iPhone so that if you wish, you can, you know, choose a higher resolution image to make your postcards. And it's fairly simple. All you do is email the image to yourself.
Full resolution image.
Right. The 1200 by 800, cut it down, you know, to something reasonable. And then save it, and it will save it in camera roll or roll camera, whatever it is there.
Right.
And then you can bring it into PhotoCard at full resolution. Oh. And you can also zoom into it in your iPhone without it pixelating.
That's good to know. I have a reverse trick for you.
Okay.
If you take a picture in your iPhone and you share it via email, the iPhone kindly downsamples it from the native, which is what, 1600 by 1200 to 800 by 600. It cuts it in half.
Right.
And that's very frustrating. And I discovered in China, somebody told me, oh, well, here's what you do. You copy and paste the picture if you've got a new model iPhone. So you just press and hold the picture in the camera roll, press copy, and then go to your email and paste it. And it'll paste in the full resolution image. So don't use the share. Use copy and paste.
That's the trick.
Clever trick. And that was good because I took a lot of pictures, including very high resolution panos. Because, of course, as you add the image, it gets to be much higher resolution as a total image, and I didn't want that to be cut down.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll be doing a lot of that, actually, at CES. We're going to we set up a Posterous blog, so which is, I think, twitlive.posterous.com, so people can email, as we go around, all of our hosts can email pictures, videos, whatever, to the Posterous blog, and that distributes it to the various Twit properties automatically.
Oh, cool.
So as I take pictures, I'm going to make sure I copy and paste.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Along those same lines, I'm going to make a few predictions.
Oh, I'd like to hear your predictions.
For the next few years. And looking back, you know, the other thing that happened in the last decade is we've had what I call the megapixel race. And, you know, cameras have gotten higher and higher resolution. And the digital camera has really come into its own. The other thing that I think has happened in this decade that is very important is, as far as I'm concerned, there still are a few diehards, but as far as I'm concerned, film is dead. And the debates about which is better, digital or film, are slowly, those voices are, well, some of them are literally dying out. But you know, that was argued for quite some time.
Yes.
And my prediction is that because of the diffraction limits of light, and I've done a whole section on this, but I predict that the megapixel race is going to asymptotically roll off over the next year or two, and we're not going to see much of an increase in megapixels because we don't have any lenses that are good enough to do it. It's not just the lenses, it's the property of light.
Right.
And there's a brick wall there. It's going to get a little better, and there are a few very expensive, very exotic, very wide aperture lenses that could make use of a higher pixel density. But they're few and far between. For mere mortals who can afford normal, when I say normal, I'm talking about $2,000 lenses, the L series on the Canon, we're pretty well reached the limits.
When I saw that the Canon on its 7D had such high pixel density, it's an 18 megapixel camera on an APS-C sensor.
Yes.
I thought that doesn't seem good to me. But people are getting good results with it.
They're getting good results, yes and no. They'll get especially good results down at f2.8 and f4. But as soon as they get up around f8 or something, if they stop down more than that, the picture is definitely going to get less sharp,
right,
even at its sharpest point. And it's limited by the lenses. That camera is definitely the case. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get a printable picture and a nice picture, and if you stop it down to f16 or whatever, you'll get an acceptable result, but it won't be as sharp as if you'd shot it at f4 or f5.6.
So you suffer in two ways. It's a smaller sensor, so I think it's not as good the picture quality goes down with that, and because it's such a high pixel density,
yes,
you suffer there too.
Right.
And so, I was having a little debate with Jason Calacanis, who said, well, he was going from a 40D, so probably it makes sense to stick with the APS-C size sensor because he expects his lenses to act a certain way, and if he goes to a full frame sensor, suddenly they're not going to be as long as he thought they were.
Right.
But at the same time, he said, "Oh, everybody told me the 7D was a better camera," and I thought, well, in some respects, it's got a faster burst mode and it has more varied video modes. But I think in the critical area of picture quality, I just can't believe that a camera with a smaller sensor and a much higher pixel density is going to be anywhere close to as good as a full-frame sensor with a lower pixel density.
Well, one of the things that I'm delighted with is DP Review now has pixel density in a prominent location on every camera, and they're...
What's a good pixel density? What am I looking for? Do you know?
Oh... You know what? They express it as
pixels per millimeter or something like that.
Per square millimeter.
Square millimeter, yeah.
And I can't remember the numbers. What I say is I don't like to see the pixels get any smaller than about 6 microns. And I'd have to stop and work that out in the numbers that they're using. But I mean, I like them to be up around 10 microns.
And what is a side effect? What is it going to look like? You said not as crisp.
Well, what happens is the airy disk, which is the proper name for it.
And I refer you to an earlier show where we talked about this in detail, of course.
Right. As you stop down, that airy disk gets larger, which is a blur, essentially. And when it gets larger than a pixel or 2 pixels, it starts degrading the picture. In other words, if you zoom in 100%, you're going to see that the picture is not sharp.
Right.
And
well, it just stands to reason if the pixels are tiny, the effective pixels on the sensor are tiny, they're not going to be as effective.
Right. And if you go to DP Review and you go to the lens reviews,
they do this really well.
They have this chart. They show you the Nyquist frequency for it. Now, keep in mind, they show you a Nyquist frequency for a specific camera, and you have to go then look at the pixel density for that camera. And they show you that a lot of the lenses, as soon as you stop them down very far, they fall below the Nyquist frequency. So now you're limited by the lens, not the resolution of the array. And of course, this also goes back to the argument of which is better, digital or film. Well, people never never really thought about what the final resolution of film, and I'm not going to go into it today. But when you get into digital, where they're, where the pixels have a finite size, it's very clear what the brick wall is. Where the lenses fail to live up to the digital array.
So the irony is, to get pictures of equal quality, you need much better lenses on a 7D than you do on a 5D. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. That is true.
Yeah.
That is an irony, isn't it?
Yeah, because the 7D is sold as a less expensive, consumer camera.
Right.
And a lot of people will have, lenses they're taking over from 40Ds or 10Ds or 20Ds. And they may be a little disappointed.
Yes, yes.
They won't look as good as they thought it should. Right. It's because 18 megapixels on that APS-C lens, or sensor rather, versus 21 megapixels on a full frame, more than twice as big.
Yeah, and I think you hit the diffraction limit on the 7D around f/6.
Right, you were telling me that.
Yeah.
Much to my chagrin. Okay.
All right, the next topic that I wanted to talk about is, I heard you talking about participating in the genetic...
it's the Personal Genome Project.
Right. And the concerns about privacy.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking about that, and... the argument goes that if it becomes public knowledge, your genetic makeup, you might not be able to get health insurance.
Oh, that's more than that, but that's certainly would be.
Or you might not be able to get a job.
Right.
Or, all this sort of thing. And after thinking about it carefully, I thought, well, now, you know what? It doesn't matter if you have universal health care, and if you have
that's a
laws
big if.
that say you can't discriminate, and we have both of those in Canada. Everybody gets health care. It doesn't matter what your genetic makeup is or your predisposition.
That's a good point.
And it's true in most of the Western world, with the exception of my home country,
the U.S. Us, I know.
And
so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to tell people, because this is interesting. We're going to interview George Church from Harvard. He's a Harvard geneticist in February on Futures in Biotech. And preparatory to that, I'm going to get a little kit from the Personal Genome Project, which I think is personalgenomes.org. But you can Google Personal Genome Project and you'll find it. And they're going to send me a little mouth swab kit, and I'm going to send them a sample of my genetic material. And they then do a simple gene analysis sequence. They don't do a full gene sequence, but because that's complicated and expensive, but they do the kind of the basic gene sequence. And then they ask me, how much do you weigh? What kind of health problems do you have? Do you have hair? They get your phenotype. They've got my genotype from the mouth swab, but now they need all my medical information for the phenotype. And the point is, they want to match 100,000 participants from the general public. They want to match phenotype to genotype, and they should be, as a result of that sample, be able to say things like, well, this gene seems to have an impact on, obesity or heart disease or so forth. So this is a really fascinating project, but they do warn you, we cannot protect your privacy, so we're not even going to try. We could say we'll do everything we can to, keep that information private and stuff. But because we're going to share this with so many researchers all over the world, this database is going to be incredibly valuable. We believe the information will leak out. So we're not even going to make an attempt. We're going to attach it to your name. We're going to say it's public from day one. Right. So if you do this, know that you're making public your genotype and phenotype. And somebody called me on the radio show, because I was talking about this on the radio show, and said, you should think about your kids. Because not only you're giving away your genotype, you're giving away their genotype. Well, that's not strictly true, but maybe tendencies, Right. And maybe they won't be able to. The example guy says, what if he wants to be in a rock band? He knows my son plays the guitar. And the members of the rock band go, well, we'd love to have you in the band, Hank, but, according to your dad's genotype, you have a tendency toward alcoholism. We're going to keep you well away from you.
Right. I know.
Hard to legislate against that.
All those things are possible.
Yeah.
Now, let me point something out, because when people get to talking about these kinds of things, and they talk about private enterprise, and, we talked about, insurance companies and so forth, they should be able to charge more money for smokers, or, all these self-inflicted diseases, or if they know you have a genetic predisposition. There was a guy back in history who preached that same thing, that, we should weed out.
Mm-hmm.
And his name was Adolf Hitler,
Mm-hmm.
and we called it eugenics.
Yep.
So it just, on one hand, it's despotism and Nazism and eugenics, and on the other hand, it's free enterprise.
Right.
It just depends on the labels you apply to these things.
Right.
So you have to stop and think about all the possible implications, and, very carefully decide how you want to handle these things. Because I can remember a company, MDA, the company I worked for that did remote sensing, we self-insured as far as people's salary. In other words, we said, when the company was small, we said, we will have no limit to the number of sick days you can take, but don't take sick days unless you need them. And we had one fellow in the company, when it was about 40 people, who got quite ill and was off work for quite some time. And the general manager, sat us down and said, as long as we make an average of this many working days per year, we're okay. We can support this guy and his family and whatnot. And we did. But once somebody spoke up and said, well, wait a minute, giving sick days to people, what if it's self-inflicted injury? What if they went out on the beach and got sunburned really badly and they couldn't come into work? Why should we pay for them? And another guy said, well, then are we going to exclude people who smoke? And then somebody immediately came up, because Vern Detweiler, one of the founders, and I were both pilots. And they said, well, are we going to exclude pilots? I think flying small airplanes is dangerous.
Right.
And so, again, the general manager said, look, we look at the overall average, and as long as he gave us specific targets, and he said, as long as we keep it below these targets, we're fine. And we shouldn't start, we should take care of all of us, no matter what our habits at that time were. So, you have to weigh all these things and decide how you want to handle it. But it's
well, I'm living in the world of TMI. You heard about my scale that Twitter's my way, right?
Yes.
I mean,
you can't get much more public than that.
Some would say I'm a publicity hound, and I suppose that would be a fair categorization. I just kind of, I feel like I'm an experiment in some ways in living in public. And I don't mind. I enjoy it. There's something very liberating about saying, I don't have any secrets. Here's who I am.
Right.
It's very liberating.
Take it or leave it. This is me.
This is me. And it's very hard to live in a world where you're constantly protecting your secrets. And so, in a way, there's a sense of, well, fine. I've got no secrets. And but now there may be a consequence to all of this. I don't know, but
yeah.
I'm willing to take the chance. I'm self-employed. I do my own health insurance and the health insurance of my staff. And by the way, we provide good health insurance and benefits. Right. So what the heck? What the heck? You were talking about Hitler. I had a weird thought the other day.
Uh-oh. I'll fasten my seatbelt.
And since you have facial hair, maybe you'll understand this. I was thinking, well, I should maybe someday I would grow a mustache or a beard. But there's one mustache one may never grow. One may not grow a Charlie Chaplin mustache.
Yeah.
Isn't that a strange taboo? If you did that, you would be shunned. People would stone you. They would yell at you. It's just a mustache. Charlie Chaplin had one. But because Hitler had it, he tarnished that facial hairstyle for how long? For centuries, no doubt.
That's right.
But in and of itself, it is not an evil. There's nothing wrong with it. Is that? I guess it's a thought about the nature of taboo.
Right.
Because taboo is, in general, is often very silly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that one just struck me the other day. I was thinking, I could easily grow one. Mm-hmm. What would be the personal consequences of doing it? Pretty severe.
Right. And we even shun the name by and large. There's not that many people with that.
Adolf is not a name you would name your kid.
Right.
No, you're a good point. Good point.
Yeah, something like some character in history. I mean, how many kids are named Judas?
There you go. Whereas there are a lot named Jesus. So
right. There you go.
So I'm curious about that mustache. You don't see that very often.
No.
According to Wikipedia, it's called the toothbrush mustache, the 1/3 mustache, or the soul stash.
But there was such a stigma with that one historical figure that, people would really think twice before growing that kind of mustache.
But before that, it was Charlie Chaplin, who was beloved.
Yes, exactly. It had a completely positive association, but not after World War II.
Just a crazy thing.
Right.
In 2009, a British comedian, Richard Herring, created a stand-up show entitled Hitler Mustache to see if he, quote, could reclaim the toothbrush mustache for comedy. He says it was Chaplin's first, then Hitler ruined it.
Yep.
Odd.
Right.
I think my grandfather had one. This is one of the reasons I was thinking of it.
Right.
Yeah, many, many moons ago. Didn't Dennis the Menace, his father, I think, had one? I'm looking here. There's quite a few people actually in history that did have mustaches like that.
I've never had just a mustache. I just let it all grow.
You've always had the full Monty, hey?
I grew this when I joined MDA, McDonald Detweiler and Associates, in 1974, and I've worn it ever since.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's another example of me just living. My chin is out in public.
Yeah.
Nothing to hide.
Nothing to hide.
Moving along to our next topic.
Moving along, I see that Ginkgo Biloba has been exposed.
Really? I didn't know it was hiding.
Yeah, it was. They shaved its beard.
Yes.
No. They did a proper scientific study of its effect with regard to Alzheimer's patients, because it was touted as
I didn't know that.
Slowing down Alzheimer's. And
yes, it's in a lot of brain drinks, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And there was an earlier study that showed in normal people that it had no effect. And now they have done a study that shows that it has no effect.
No effect in any case. In
any case. So if you like it, fine. But
it is harmless.
Yeah, I didn't hear of any negative effects.
Okay.
But according to this most recent study, there's no benefit from it. So that was in the main news. Oh, the other thing I heard mentioned on one of the other shows, and I wanted to correct it. If you have a camera with a metering system built in and you are shooting on snow where the large part of the picture is white, bright snow, your manual override on your exposure should be increased or decreased. Should the lens be opened up or closed down?
Should be closed down, right?
No.
No. Should be opened up.
Should be opened up.
Okay. Yeah, I think Chris Marquardt did this on the radio show, and I got a couple other calls saying that's not right.
That's right.
And I think he knows better. I think he misspoke probably. So tell us what we should do.
Okay, think about it. Your camera expects a scene that reflects 18% of the light.
Right.
And
he's trying to avoid the muddiness that you get in
the
snow.
Standard meter.
Right.
So if you have something that reflects 90% of the light, which is typical of snow,
it's going to darken it down.
It's going to the camera will stop the lens down to make the snow appear gray, middle gray.
Okay.
All right? And you don't want the snow to be gray. You want it to be white.
Right.
So you have to open the camera up and increase the exposure so that the snow is, in fact, white.
That makes
sense.
sense.
Typically, it's a stop to a stop and a half.
Yeah. I think that's what he meant to say.
Yes.
His explanation tells me that he understood that. He was saying exactly that you want to blow out the snow, in effect.
Well, you don't want to blow it out, but you don't want it to be muddy gray.
You want to turn it up.
You want it to be bright white.
Right.
And so
You'd know that immediately if you took the picture. You'd say, oh, that's not the effect I was looking for.
Yeah, you'll get a muddy gray snow if you just use the normal exposure, expecting the camera expecting to see a normal scene. And I've heard that flipped many, many times.
Right.
But you have to work your way through it and say, well, what does the meter expect to see, and then what does it see?
You're saying
how does it
let in more light. We need more light.
Need more light to get that snow white, not gray.
Right.
Okay, another thing that I think has happened in the decade that I'm excited about as the color guy, I think that color measurement and color management is starting to mature. When I started in color science back in the mid-90s, a spectrophotometer cost somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000.
That's the thing that you do to calibrate your printer, right?
To measure color.
Yeah.
Okay, where you want to measure color and get an LAB reading or 24 to 32 channel spectral reading. From the 32 channels of spectral data, you can then run it through an algorithm that'll give you the LAB color, which is how a human being would respond to this color or what the human being would see. So that has gone from, $8,000 to $10,000, which was the first instrument I used when I joined Creo back in the 90s. You can now get the Color Monkey for around $500. And now, is it as good as that top-end instrument? Probably not, but it's quite adequate.
We should do a show on colorimeters and photospectrometers.
Yeah.
Because this is one of your areas of expertise, and I know we've covered it quite a bit on Call for Help and the lab, but I think it'd be really good to kind of have people understand the issues and the art of color calibration.
Right. By the way, I have been invited to be a guest on This Week in Photography.
Good.
And I'm going to cover some of those things over there as well.
Good. So a colorimeter you use to measure your screen color and calibrate it. And, and a spectrophotometer you use on paper, right, to just calibrate the printer.
Well, really what it is the spectrophotometer is a 32-channel device. The colorimeter is a 3-channel device. It only has a red, green, and a blue filter. And if you know the characteristics of the filters in an LCD display or the characteristics of the phosphors in a CRT, you can infer and get repeatable and accurate color measurements with just a 3-channel device. But one of the problems is that the LCD technology and the filters used has begun to change somewhat, and especially if you used a colorimeter on a plasma versus an LCD, they're not the greatest things. You can, if you can afford it, the best thing is a spectrophotometer, even for calibrating a monitor. But in lieu of, you can get a calibrator for a monitor for $150. And that's kind of the bare minimum that you need if you're going to do any kind of serious color work or photography.
Good. We must do a show on that. Yeah. Really like
Precisely.
We're going to get to more in just a bit, including, I know you want to talk a lot about this terrorist attempted bombing on Christmas Day on Flight 253 and more importantly, the upshot of it.
Yeah, why don't I jump to that? And
well, before you do, I wanted to talk about sync.
Okay, yes.
And but we certainly can. And I know you have some sync information, too, which I think I want to get in here because I think it's very interesting. We're going to be going to a CES as guests of sync, the great in-car, hands-free Bluetooth music and podcast search emergency call technology that is in new Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury vehicles. It is so cool. It's a technology provided or invented by Microsoft. It's the Microsoft Automotive, and the sync has really, the Ford, Lincoln, Mercury folks have really improved it, touched it up, to make it really, I think, one of the most useful things I've ever seen in a car. I mean, not merely just, my phone connects. It's funny, we were just out in the back of the place doing a video commercial, and it saw my phone. I must be 40 feet from my phone, but it still saw my phone and it started playing my book, because it supports A2DP, which is that stereo Bluetooth profile that lets you play music. Works great. So you get in the car, your phone starts playing if you have an iPhone or a Bluetooth device that has music on it. Has a USB jack, so you can plug in any other device. It even has an audio jack, so if you've got headphones, a device that uses headphones, you can even use that. But I love plugging in the USB stuff because it can then scan it, index it, and you can call for songs by name. Now, we're going to be down there. I know Ford had some big announcements. We've seen a couple of announcements already, but there's some big announcements for Sync. In fact, we're going to talk to the CEO of Ford at our event, and the guy who designed and works as chief engineer at Sync. So I tune in. We'll be there January 6th through 10th. You can watch live Wednesday and Thursday evening, the 6th and 7th, as we do our party roundup and our product roundup from the big press events. That'll be starting probably around 5 or 6 p.m. Eastern time. And then on Friday all day, Saturday all day, and Sunday all day, we're just going to be covering it like crazy. And everybody's going to be down there. Dick DeBartolo, Paul Thurrott, Ryan Shrout. We're just going to have a blast. I hope you'll come by and say hi. And if you do, ask to see the Lincoln. We're getting a Lincoln on loan to drive down with all our gear, and we'll have the Sync in there so you can take a look at it. Or, best thing, go to the website, syncmyride.com, or visit your local Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury dealer and say, I want to test drive the Sync. Syncmyride.com. We thank Ford for their support, and the Sync stuff is great. You just got to try it. You had a Sync, something about Sync I see in your notes here.
Yes, I saw an announcement the other day that Sync is going to give you Wi-Fi in your car.
Yay! Isn't that cool?
And what really floored me is it said no monthly fee.
I didn't know that.
That's what the announcement I saw said.
I'll tell you what. I think that Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury know that it sells cars.
Yes.
And so they could nickel and dime you. Yeah. They have built in the Sirius Travel Link, which is a subscription service, and they give you the first 3 years free. So I think that they feel like, this sells the car. It's worth it. We're going to sell this. A car's not a cheap item. We'll eat the $8 a month or whatever that would cost us to provide that service. They also have some interesting iPod integration. They're doing some really neat stuff, and we're going to hear some big announcements.
Well, I think that's really neat, and
cool.
Any Wi-Fi device in your car can connect to the internet via this system. That's what they're saying is coming.
I don't know how fast it'll be, but it's really amazing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So now down to the heavy-duty stuff.
Yes. Let's get to it.
We had an attempted bombing on Northwest Flight 253. It was actually a Delta aircraft. They're merged now.
Right.
And I want to point out some facts, and then I want to ask some questions. The first fact is that this gentleman that attempted to bomb this flight, his father, who is a highly respected banker in Nigeria, went to the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria and specifically talked to a CIA representative and said, I'm very concerned about my son. He's come under the influence of radical mullahs, and I think you ought to keep an eye on him, and I'm very concerned about him.
Yeah.
Next, the British revoked his entry visa to Great Britain, again, because he had been associated with some radical mullahs in that area, as I gather. He went to university there. He paid cash for his airline ticket, and he was flying with no baggage.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in every respect, this is a red flag.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the guy could have done short of putting a sign on his forehead
and meanwhile
saying, I am a terrorist.
And meanwhile, the TSA in the States and whoever you have in Canada are searching 80-year-old ladies, little kids, taking mother's milk away. It's security theater. It's not security.
It's absolutely security theater. And now let's look at the latest. They've now said in the last hour of a flight, you will not be able to get up from your seat. You will not be able to go to the bathroom. You will not be able to take anything out of the overhead compartments. I've heard here in Canada, you won't be allowed to you only one carry-on piece of baggage, and you can't put it under your feet. You have to put it in the overhead and then not touch it. One flight out of Canada in the last few days, I heard from a friend who said they got on the plane and they told them to remain in their seats. It was a short flight across the border into the U.S., and they told them that they could not leave their seats during the flight, period. Okay? Now, let's back up the truck a
How
moment.
long was that flight?
I don't know.
I hope it was a half-hour flight, because if I can't get up and pee for 4 hours, they're going to have a problem.
All right. Now, Leo, make sure nobody's listening.
Okay. It's just us.
Just you and I. I'm going to let you in on a real secret. If they had a terrorist that had just an ounce of brains, he might detonate his device before the last hour of the flight. Right.
That's what Bruce Schneier said, of course.
Yeah, and then another fellow said, well, the reason we don't want it detonated in the last hour of the flight is because the aircraft's coming down, and an explosion is more dangerous if the airplane is coming down. I'm sorry. I am a scientist. I know something about airplanes. Airplanes are pressurized. Where are the most forces, the highest pressure inside the cabin during the flight? When it's at its highest altitude.
Oh, so the best time to blow it up would be...
I wouldn't want it. Don't tell anybody.
Let's not say that, but I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is just reactionary baloney.
It's baloney. Well, they do this every time. I mean, somebody blows up his shoes. Oh, search shoes. Somebody blows up the plane or tries to in the last hour of the flight. Well, we better keep people in their seats the last hour of the flight. A commentator on CNN said, next thing you'll know, a terrorist will sing Mary Had a Little Lamb, and they'll prevent singing on airplanes. Right. Because it's not related to the,
it's
nothing. It has nothing to do with it.
To take counterterrorism to the terrorist, not terrorize the poor law-abiding citizen that's trying to go about his business and all this theater. I really think it's absurd. Look, they should have caught this guy before he ever boarded the plane.
Well, and even Obama said this is a horrible failure. I mean, just a horrible failure.
Yeah, and I want to see some heads roll over this. This is really ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I want them to do away with that last hour baloney. It's just absolute baloney. It doesn't make me feel one iota, safer. And they're even, this commentator saying, oh, well, the plane is in more danger when it's at lower altitudes, which is baloney.
Right.
But, they're just piece by piece, they're taking our rights and our comforts away from us in the name of safety. I don't think we're any safer at all. And in the end, if that's what's happening, the terrorists have won. We've just got to run up the white flag and say, we're going to live in fear, and we're going to,
Is that a shame?
It's sad. It's really, really sad. And the other thing, let me be more specific in what I think needs to be done. Let's look back in our own history. The way we essentially put a significant end to the activities of the Ku Klux Klan is we infiltrated them. The FBI infiltrated them, got the goods on them, sued them, so they took away all their properties and so forth. But they knew what those guys were all about. And they were terrorists. They were, terrorists within the U.S.
Domestic terrorists, you bet.
Domestic terrorists. And they infiltrated them. Now, what I think is wrong is we haven't had enough people that are intimate with the cultures of the groups that are terrorists. But I think if we were much more surgical, and by the way, that's what is starting to happen, you know, since Obama got in, they have been, with these drones and so forth, more surgical and trying to take out the leadership instead of, you know, wide front wars on this thing. Because all that happens when you have a wide front like that and invade a country and try and nation build is you tick off all the locals and the people who really don't want to be involved at all. And then they start supporting the terrorists. But whereas if you're much more surgical in your strikes, you know, you get the leaders of these guys, and that is much more effective. But so far, I think many of the efforts in the last 8 years have done nothing but increase the recruitment of terrorists in some of these countries, sadly.
Well, it's interesting. For the first time in a long time, public support for TSA and what's going on is really kind of widely evaporating, and I think that's somewhat because of this and what they did.
Yeah.
Well, now, Ray, I want to cheer you up a little bit.
All right.
Because Dr. Kiki is here, and she has brought champagne.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Kiki.
Pull a mic over there, Dr. Kiki. It is New Year's Eve here as we record the show, and
yeah, you'd think I remember the microphone by now.
Now, Leo, you haven't asked me how I spend my New Year's
What
Eve.
do you do, Ray Maxwell? What does Maxwell's house do for New Year's Eve?
We have a long tradition of sitting in our hot tub sipping champagne.
I likes it.
That sounds good.
How long do you sit? Do you get pruny?
No, well, you know, we wait till about 11:45.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You know,
that sounds like
go
fun.
out and welcome the new year.
Well,
up to our chin in 106-degree Fahrenheit water.
Happy new decade.
106. That's hot. I
like it that hot.
We keep our hot
104?
tub at maybe 101.
101? That's not a hot tub. That's a warm tub.
It's hot enough.
That's a lukewarm tub.
I get.
You know, the whole idea, you got to have it really hot so you don't move. You can't move.
Yeah, you have to have a real deep soak, you know. We're in it every day, but not for very long, you know. But 102 to 104 is more sociable. You can stay in for an hour or two.
For longer, exactly.
Sociable.
Yeah. The sociable hot tub temperatures. That sounds so nice, though. I hope you have a wonderful New Year's Eve tonight with your traditional soak. And
we'd send you a glass of champagne, but we're kind of going to drink it all ourselves. So, hey, but Happy New Year. And what was I going to say? I guess it's gone completely out of my mind. Oh, you want to stay tuned, Ray, because we're going to be talking about something that I think that would be very interesting to you, the National Institute of Standards and Time, NIST. We're going to talk about the atomic clock.
Oh, super.
Yeah.
I knew you'd want to know more about that.
Well, you know, I did the thing on GPS and the clocks and how they have to adjust them for relativity.
That's right.
Yes.
So this person would know all about that.
Thank you, Ray Maxwell. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Kiki and Leo.
Happy New Year.
We'll see you next time.
All right. All the best.
All the best.